Hello folks, the Alco diesel guy here. For the longest time I've always wanted to put sound on this type of locomotive. This is an RS-36 built by Atlas, not as a classic, but as a Trainman. This is sort of Atlas's new economy. I wouldn't say new, it's been around a couple of years, about 10 years now. It's their economy run, there I go again, run of these locomotives. Essentially a stripped down engine that's supposed to be more affordable, though the prices really aren't that much different from what I've seen. The retail on this is about the same as what a classic would be. I think there's a $20 or $30 difference. Difference nonetheless is if you want an RS-36, this is essentially what you're going to pay. This is essentially what you're going to buy, and essentially they'll wind up costing you about as much as an RS-11 would off of eBay or in the second-hand market, or technically first-hand collector market, as I call it, because there are a lot of people who buy engines, as you know, as we all know, as model railroaders, and don't actually do anything with them because of the unique way everything is done these days. You pre-order an engine, and probably by the time you get it, you don't want it anymore, but you might as well take delivery of it and try to sell it off. Anyway. First things first, I'd like to put sound back on what I want to do. I want to put sound on this engine, and I finally figured out a way of doing it. First, let me, of course, go through the foibles of this particular operation. To start with, of course, these engines are based upon, as I open this up here, I'll keep talking. These engines are based upon the Atlas RS-11. Nothing against that. Kato made it for Atlas back in the day. The frame was later adjusted a bit more for the Classic Series when it was brought out by Atlas, when Atlas moved production from Japan back to China, when it took over production of these directly. And not a bad engine by any extent. The only problem, in fact, they were a great puller, but that actually worked against it, because you see, it became a great puller because of, as you'll see in a second here, the reason why this was such a great puller, as I was saying before, as I get this frame off, just undoing the screw spokes, got to get the screws off to get this thing open. Anyway, as I was saying, the reason why this is a great puller is the fact that, well, most of this engine is composed of weight, just like the RS3, the RS11 and the RS3, I should say, too. They were both based upon the same chassis. The RS11 was later re-engineered to have the truck spread differently, although it's still shorter. Anyway, the fact that all the weight inside makes it a great puller, but the drawback of that is, as I struggle to get this thing out, the drawback of that, boy, this thing is not happy at all, is it, tonight? Ah, there we are. Let me get this thing out. There we go. As I was saying, the drawback of all that is that there's almost no room to work with. You know, it looks very similar. The main difference is we note here this front weight has been clearanced to make it fit the short hood on this locomotive right over here. As you can see, the old Atlas RS-11, if we take a look over here, here's a classic, more recent run of it from Nacionales de Mexico. This engine's still waiting for service. I haven't gotten around to it. This is a high nose, so you had basically two of these weights on both sides, which was fine. The problem is with this engine, as we see, we have a much lower nose, and that will not clear, the weight, I should say, will not clear that. So how did Atlas deal with this? They simply shaved the weight down, and, well, this is what we got. It's clearance to get over the truck right over here, and they did a pretty decent job. And how they got around the lack of weight is they simply spread it out more toward the front. It's a very unique thing, and it didn't cost them much in the way of weight, because they were able to transfer the weight further into the nose, so the weight is actually slightly longer than it would have normally been. But that made up for the problem with how this all worked in terms of getting it all to fit the way it was supposed to. Anyway, this has been the big issue. There's no room in here, as you see, to go with anything. This particular unit has a decoder installed. This is a DCC decoder. I think this is a TCS decoder. It's an older one that I've had in here. That won't be in there much longer, because I'm going to put sound in it, as I mentioned. The question is, where am I going to put it? Well, you can do two things. Basically, you're going to wind up having to do something with this rear weight back here. Put this further into the camera for you. This is the basic scourge of this engine, and unless you have tools, it can be a bit tricky. You can do, as I was saying with the weight, you can cut it down yourself, and here's what I came up with a $5, and no, I don't have fancy equipment. This is a $5 hacksaw I bought off the shelf at Lowe's. I did a decent job, took forever to cut. I basically took two chunks off. Notice the top part here was cut off here where the headlight assembly is, and I basically removed that, and I cut this out smooth. I got like a platform to mount my speaker. I'm going to try to see if this fits. The other option you could do is go to Atlas and actually buy. Anyway, as I was saying, you basically could go to Atlas and buy for about just under $7 one of these. This is a weight set for that engine. It includes both the front and the rear weight set. Weight for it, I should say. why would I want to buy another weight set? One would say, what are you thinking now, Alco Diesel guy? Well, it's really quite simple. The front weight obviously has more clearance, and because these weights are designed as a modular set off of the old RS11s, they can be swapped. So I can literally put a front weight on the rear of this engine and make it work. The only catch is I'll lose the headlight mount here for the tail, or the tail light, I should say, but I'm not much of a headlight guy, and you could probably easily fabricate something to put the light in place if you needed it. But before I do that, I'm actually going to try my home fabricated weight. This is pretty much trashed. I don't know if I'm going to get anything out of it, so cross my fingers and see what I can do. So the first step anyway in getting this project going and sort of getting it to go is to take the guts out. You'll note I've already removed that decoder. I didn't lose it. It didn't float out of here, which has happened sometimes in my bizarre notions. At least it's my only explanation I can come up with. These things tend to get grow legs. Anyway, I always seem to lose them. Anyway, I managed to save this one. I put it down. I've already put it in storage. It's going to be handy and maybe sell it off or maybe put it in a different engine for testing purposes or something else. Going to now basically take this weight out. First, I might actually want to remove this headlight assembly. Going to untape this because I know I'm not going to use this anymore. I'll keep the light to the side in case I ever want to put it back in, or in case I need another engine, in case I have another one of these that needs a light. I've noticed the last one I've done had the same issue. I should also point out what I'm going to put in here. The decoder I'm going to use for this project, because this has an 8-pin socket on it, and this is something I haven't done very much because I usually prefer the Select Direct jobs, is this guy here. This is a Lock-Sound Select micro decoder. Essentially what this is a Select Direct if you look inside carefully with this little guy here. But instead of having an adapter board to plug into the stock board, it just has an 8-pin harness that will go right into this little guy over here. Make things a little bit easier for me. Anyway, first step, get this weight off. I'm going to carefully move this wire over the side. It's going to be pretty easy to work on. Take my screwdriver here and undo the screw. That's one screw out. I'm going to hang on to these because I'm going to need to reuse them when I put the weight back in. When I put either the modified weight or the new one in, because they don't come with screws. So you definitely don't want to lose them. You'll be very sorry if you lose one. A little bit more light for you here. Okay, and up it goes. And that's the weight. Now again, you can see how I had to modify this thing to make it fit. And this is, again, not the greatest work I've ever done. A chunk has been taken out of it, but it should work. This is significantly lighter. I can feel it already, but it will add some weight to it. Now I've got what's left of my weight. I'm going to put this back in place. Grab the screws I just took out, put them back down the holes. I have to fight with it a little bit to get it down. You got to adjust the clutch on this screwdriver. This is a clutch screwdriver, despite its small size. Got this this past Christmas. Home Depot had a sale on these. Actually, excuse me, Lowe's did. I've been buying a lot of parts from Lowe's lately, and gotta tell you that's really handy. Okay, so it's in now. I only need one screw to hold it. And now, just for giggles, I'm going to pull my Lock-Sound speaker out of the box. It's not attached yet. I'm going to have to spend a separate day actually going through this to see how it would work. Ooh, that's not nice. There's no speaker in here. Okay, that was definitely not in the plan. That explains why I got such a good deal on this. Ouch. Okay, so I need a plan B, which I always have. Okay, it appears that the speaker was removed from this box. I don't know what the deal is here. Anyway, here's my solution to the problem, temporarily at least. I need to just check to see if this actually fits. And it's a Railmaster speaker. This is their model 1425. I'm going to use again. I like these a lot. And it goes right over here. And actually, it fits really nicely. And that's where it's going to sit. So as you can see the difference now, that weight goes in perfectly. It's got plenty of clearance on the end. It's going to fit perfectly. It's going to do its job well. This is the perfect solution to my problems. At least now I know where I can get a speaker from with ease. Anyway, so now that's how I'm going to proceed on this. Now, unfortunately, I have to also see about this decoder and see why I didn't get a speaker with it. These usually come with a small decoder, speaker, I should say, with the decoder package. For some reason, this one didn't come with one, so I'm not all too thrilled to find that out now. I need to contact the supplier and say, hey, what happened? Or get a partial refund or something. I think it may have been that it wasn't included, but I don't see why they wouldn't do that. Anyway, I'm going to now go through a few more checks and do a little more research on this and get this project going. I also want to now check to see if this truck will swivel freely. Looks like it does. One side of the clearance is now gone, so it's not as strong as it normally would be. So I lost a little of the weight that goes on the back here. But I do have some of it on there, at least now. It's not completely biased toward the front. Anyway, that'll do it for the current time. Now I'm going to do a little bit more research and see why I didn't get my weight with, get the proper assembly with this thing, and I'll get back to this project as soon as I can. Things first, got to take the old headlight out here and get it ready, because obviously I'm not going to mount this anymore. I'm not a headlight guy, really. If you've seen any of my other videos, I'll do it if I can, but I'm not going to go nuts to try to get them going. In this case, I'm going to try to have headlights on this engine, because I think the lines really work well. One thing I still cannot get past, I'll just rant a little bit while I get these stupid things off, is why Atlas insists upon calling, and why Atlas charges so much for these engines. They're not as well detailed. As you notice on the frame, again, there's no diamond plating on the frame or anything like that. It's a very plain, untextured setup, no grab irons in the front, etc. And yet Atlas still charges the same amount of money they would if this was actually a classic model. The RS11, for example, retails for the exact same price, $129, as this does with DCC readiness out of the box. So one really has to wonder exactly what the deal is and why Atlas is like this on this model. Then again, I guess it's because no one else would dare take the challenge of engineering something like this. It does have the low nose, and I guess that took a little bit of money out of their pockets to crank out. Anyway, here's the decoder as I showed you before already. And again, it is essentially what you find on the Select Direct engine. This little top piece is right here. This clips onto the top of a Select Direct, except obviously in this case it won't do that, obviously. It's got the wire harness on it in the front instead. And essentially this is just going to plug right into my 8-pin decoder slot right over here, right where the old one used to be. I believe this is how they want it in. The arrow kind of gives you an indication as to which way it goes. And that's basically it. That's essentially how it installs. Now the only catch is there's no speaker attached, which I'm going to now rectify with that lock sound, speaker I had before. I'm going to go ahead and connect this up, and I'm going to use it to run this thing. I notice that there's a purple wire here. As far as I know, both brown wires are the speaker wires. I better just double check this and see where the heck this other wire would go. Yeah, that's definitely something else. That's a function to output. I see now where that goes. Okay, so now I just need to basically wind this one back and hook in the 2 brown wires for my speaker. Gonna now do a splice here. Gonna strip both wires down so I can wrap them together and then wire them in. I'm gonna not cut the wires down. I'm just gonna keep them at full length. Using my fingers to strip these wires. I never like doing that, but I don't have a stripper that's quite this small. It's very easy to damage this wire too, so you have to really be careful with it. Got the 2 decoders ready. Gonna get my soldering iron ready. It's not a very big soldering job. I just have to connect the 2 wires. Once they are connected, that'll do it. What I'm gonna do next is get myself some heat shrink tube, which I had right in here. There we go. This little heat shrink tube off of eBay. Perfect little thing. It's a little bit too big for this job. I think I have some smaller stuff over here. These are particularly small wires. Blackstone tends to use very tiny wires to make things as easy as possible. So I'm going to use a very small heat shrink tube for that. There we go, that'll do perfect. I'm gonna have to get more of this stuff. I've been using this like crazy. Now, the two brown wires connect to my speaker. Again, there's no sort of positive and negative. You could sort of figure it out, but because a speaker functions out like a light bulb, it has to have positive, it has to have negative power, and as long as you don't hook one up to the other, as long as you don't hook two up to the same source, you won't blow it out. Everything will be fine. You do that, though, and you're in big trouble, so be very wary on that. You have to unwind this wire a little bit. If there's any excess wire, I'll trim it down. Okay, it's one wire twisted over. I think I'm going to do one at a time here because I have a feeling this will let go again if I'm not careful. I don't know why this frame keeps getting in my way. I should have, if I had been smart, which I'm not, I would have moved this out of the way already. So let me get rid of it now. Just going to put it to the side here so I don't damage it. Go ahead now and put some flux on this to help guide the solder in position so it gets to where it needs to be. Got my little micro brush back here and a little jar of this flux, which I've been using for years since I got back into the hobby a while back. More than 10 years, almost, or almost 10 years now. Still have not used the one thing of flux up. I solder pretty frequently. Well, not frequently, but I don't do it infrequently, I guess you could say. So, not the least user, not the most user of it. Now, might have actually been smart, but because I'm not, I forgot to turn my soldering iron and warm it up. I'm going to use a battery-powered soldering iron, nothing fancy, a Weller, battery-powered Weller I bought off this yourself at Sears for this job. I don't need a ton of heat, I just need a very minor amount of heat to hook this up. There's a little bit too much flux on there. I think I'm going to maybe get rid of some of that, but it's a real pain to get just a little bit on here. Let me see if I can knock some of that off. There we go. That looks a lot better. And then treat this with some solder, and then I'll go ahead and make the other joint, which will be to this other brown wire to the red wire over here. I'm waiting for that to heat up. I'm going to twist this wire over a few times. And grab a little flux here. Actually, I got the flux on there already. I just need to tin this a little bit. And I'm just going to go and just gently touch the twist tie, and there it is. It's now officially a solder tie. Less than a tenth of a second. Now, while that's cooling off, I'm going to go set up the other one. And after I'm done with this, I've got to then do one other minor task, which is to heat up that heat shrink tube so it'll actually shrink down the position. That's already had enough time. There's a low-powered soldering iron, and I'm using it on low power, on its low power setting, so I'm not really burning a lot of power on this. This does not take a lot of power to solder because it's such fine wire. It does not need a lot of oomph. Don't like how much smoke my soldering iron is making right now. That's Because this wire is so threaded, I had to do the old-fashioned type twist tie. I'm just going to fold it over and put it inside. It'll work just as well. Next, they have a flux. A little bit too much, but I don't think it's a pain to work with. Now I'm just going to heat this up a little bit. And we go again with the soldering iron. A little bit of flux on the bottom there. A little solder on the bottom, I should say, on the bottom of my gun. Touch it to the flux. Gets right on there. Okay, and that does it with the soldering procedure on this particular operation. Only 2 connections. As you see, they're nice and silver. That's what you want. You always want them silver, which means you got a good connection. You can get away with them without being silver, but good idea to have them silver if you can get them like that. Next, I'm going to go with the iron again with the bottom part of the iron. Switch it to, and then just touch this heat shrink stuff and get it to melt into position. Or rather, shrink into position. Kind of hard to tell, but if you look carefully, you'll note that what is happening now is this whole thing is shrinking down. Got it. Yes. All right. Yeah. Came off pretty good. Oh, that looks beautiful. All right. So a little residue on that, but I'm not having this thing judged. I just wanted it to work. So there we go. Next step is to actually fit this, which is the big problem. The last headache I'm going to do is to trim this wire back just a little bit. You never know, you might need it, so I'm going to keep this purple wire back. I don't know exactly what it's here for, but according to the instructions, this is not anything else to worry. This is nothing I need to worry about. Nonetheless, I'm still going to trim it back and just be really careful with it. Then I can move on to fitting this thing up. Now, it's not going to have sound at first because this one I did not order a sound on. Just going to go with my snips here and just cut a bit of this wire off, just so it can't make contact with anything else, and then just carefully wrap it around. I'm now going to do a rough test of this to see if I can actually power it on, and just to see for basic functionality. It shouldn't have any sound, I should say, because I didn't opt for any, unless this was programmed for someone else by mistake or something else. Doesn't make a big deal. I have a programmer here. I'm sure there are plenty of people who've ordered this sound decoder and got it home and are like shocked when it doesn't actually work. Didn't know that the person who sold it to them actually had to install sound on it. Let me get this naked wire out of here. I don't like that. It freaked me out. It just for a second there I thought I ripped something out. I guess it's fine. That's how it's going to look basically. If you notice, the speaker fits in perfectly. Well, it might help if I can actually move this into range so you can see what I'm doing. Sorry about that. Yep. That's how the speaker's going to mount. I'm going to put double-sided tape on it. See, it goes right there. It fits. It's the perfect width. It's slightly more narrow than the entire frame. Yeah, I'll probably use some double-sided tape to get that in place. But first things first, let's see if it even works. I don't think I'm going to have sound. I'll be happy if I don't see any smoke, to be honest. Power's on, and it's not smoking. That's a good sign. I'm going to test it now for basic functionality to see what it would do. I'm going to request locomotive 3. All decoders, no matter what they are, come with a default instruction. Come with a default address of 3. Well, that's interesting. There is an Alco sound on this. Now, I didn't opt for any one of this, so I'm interested as to where this sound is coming from. Doesn't sound like very much. It's almost like a dummy sound. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. It's kind of weak too. Hopefully my speaker will make more noise than that. It's the only speaker that'll fit this project. Anyway, so now I know at least I did everything right. Next phase is going to be to fit this thing. Let me go ahead and cut the power so I don't accidentally short something out while I'm doing this. So anyway, it does work, which is a great sign. But that's only part of the battle. Now I got to install my double-sided tape. This is 3N double-sided foam tape. You can buy it off the shelf at your local Walmart, which is where I got mine most recently. I bought some off of Amazon before I realized how easy this stuff was to come by, feeling kind of dumb. But anyway, just in case you were wondering, yeah, you can. Don't worry too much about it. So I just took my scissors and cut a clip off of this. I'm going to go ahead now and install this after removing the base onto this frame right here. Next, I take my speaker, and just like that, I'm going to press it in this way, I guess. That'd probably be the best way of handling it. Press down firmly, and it's in. That'll hold the speaker very well. This is very strong stuff, so it will hold very nicely. I just hope I got this thing straight enough. The weight itself is at a slight angle, but hopefully that won't cause a problem. Hopefully it'll actually help this thing get together a little bit better. Let me back it off a little bit more. Let's go a little bit further over. Ooh, that's a bit of a no-no, not to pick it up once you put it down. A note I should make is when working with double-sided tape, once you're down, you're kind of committed. Don't pick the things up once you get it down. Anyway, that does it with that. Now it's time to set this thing up to install. What I usually like to do is wrap it up in tape and just get any of the sensitive components insulated with tape and insulate them from anything else. This particular board doesn't have the D2 and D1 connections up here, I notice. One of the other models I did like this, I didn't film it, had the two capacitors going across up here. This unit doesn't have that. I don't know why, but it doesn't. So it's one less thing I have to insulate. Gotta see if there's actually anything I actually have to insulate on this at all, to be honest. Another thing I should mention is the previous model I had, but I'm tempted to test for this. I should have probably tested this. I completely forgot about it. Blew its headlight out after I finished it. It worked initially, and then it just blew out. I'm going to now insulate one thing on the base right over here, because it is freaking me out. I should mention this decoder, it comes wrapped in plastic. Not concerned about heat because these are very cool running decoders, as I have proven over and over again. Alrighty, that's how I'm gonna do it. That's gonna hold it down. So also keep the wires from getting any stupid ideas about getting up and messing things up. I may have to apply a little bit more tape back here to get that second piece, which I will. Turn to the middle here. One goof I made here by having to put the wire in like this, but I did because I just didn't have enough room, is that I'm going to have to run the wire over the speaker, so I'll try to put it to the side maybe a little bit. Nah, it'll work well enough here, I think. Thank you. It's all installed, and that'll do fine. Now it's time to test this thing again. I always do that twice just to make sure everything's cool. Unusual sound to it. It sounds like an Alco, but I didn't request it installed. So don't get me wrong, it's nice that I got that, but, you know, there we go. Light is working. We may have to cut the tape back a little bit. Other than that, it looks good. Okay. Power cut again. I always cut the power off when I'm messing with one of these because you never know what you're going to do. I'm just going to trim the tape on the back here. I don't know how well it came out, but the tape on one side is actually a little bit too long. I didn't center it correctly, but it's close enough that it'll work. Just need to cut it down. Make it fit the way it should. Then I can make this function the way it should. Okay. Next and final step is to place the shell on top. Well, actually, the final step will be installing the couplers. There we are. Line the shell up. Again, the lower end goes on top of the front, and it goes right over beautifully. Now, the rear on this seems to be a sticking point, literally. It doesn't always want to snap down. Here we go. This is the area that's stuck again. Now, the last one I did, I put the speaker in the front, so I know this has nothing to do with my speaker installation now. And every one of these I've done so far, which is, well, 2 has had this problem where the back won't snap down. The only thing you can do is just what I did there, is pick it up off the tracks, give it a apply firm pressure, and then it'll click it back down in place. So anyway, so that does it. I now have a decoder inside this engine. The next phase on this is to go ahead and program this up with the proper 251 sound, and I will have another engine with sound on it. Anyway, that'll do it for tonight, folks. I'm going to just program the sound, and I'll let you know exactly how this is going in a little bit.